Hey lovelies, good to see you again. Let's not waste time. Let me instead tell you a wee story. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a handsome king called Mindaugas. Mindaugas ruled over all that his eyes could behold, and then even more than that, for his eyes were great, but his empire was greater. And at the center of it all was a city called Kernave. Kernave is the site of an ancient capital city, once the capital of the Lithuanian Empire, or, as the people back then liked to call it, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which does indeed sound much more fancy. The ancient Lithuanians were like, what if we built a bunch of hill forts and buried treasure here? And everyone else was like, yeah, fam, that's a great idea. Nestled in the tranquil valleys along the Neris River, Kernave is known as the Troy of Lithuania. However, unlike the actual Troy, it hasn't fallen prey to some guy's obsession with a wooden horse. Neither at any point has it ever been blown up by any dumbass, stupid British archaeologists who claim to love history but also somehow have absolutely no qualms about blowing it the fuck up. Instead, Kernave proudly boasts archaeological wonders, ancient landscapes, and more hill forts than you can shake a stick at. Provided, of course, that for some reason you are physically incapable of shaking a stick at any more than 4 hill forts, because Kernave has 5. Kernave was in fact the very first capital of Lithuania. Although there may not be much left of it now, it once ruled over an empire stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Kernave's history is as rich as a medieval king's feast, if the king wasn't too picky about his gold goblets. Written historical sources first mention Kernave in the year 1279, when the city was put under siege by the Teutonic Knights, a military society formed during the Third Crusade in order to help pilgrims and slap hospitals together, although they soon ditched the pilgrim shtick to don shiny armor and take over Eastern Europe instead, because apparently that's what Yahweh wanted back in those days. Despite this siege, the knights failed in their endeavors and did not capture the city this time. Kernave continued to serve as a medieval capital during Mindaugas' reign. Mindaugas, the first and only crowned king of Lithuania, probably thought, what if we make this place the historical jackpot for future archaeologists? And boom! A UNESCO World Heritage Site was born. The archaeological site of Kernave spans multiple hill forts, burial sites, and medieval city remnants. These giant flat-topped mounds stand like ancient bouncers along the banks of the Neris River, silently judging you for not knowing Lithuanian history. Strategically placed, these fortifications were the medieval versions of Neighborhood Watch. They saw everyone that was coming and everyone that was going. Absolutely nothing passed through the Grand Duchy of Lithuania unless it was passing through Kernave too. This medieval capital served as the epicenter of the medieval FOMO, fear of missing out. If you weren't hanging out at Kernave, what were you even doing? Who even were you? Despite Kernave's power, or perhaps because of it, war soon returned. In the late 1380s, Lithuania began a slow conversion to Christianity, but just like all mass religious conversions of an entire nation, there's always at least a few folk who ain't too happy about it. In the year 1390 AD, during the Lithuanian Civil War, the Christian Teutonic Knights saw their chance and attacked Kernave once again, this time successfully burning the city to the ground. The destruction of Kernave was absolute. Even the castle was destroyed and dismantled. The city was abandoned, and over time what little was left of it was mostly covered over with peat. Except, that is, for the hill forts, which still stand majestically above the river and still judging. Always judging. Despite the city of Kernave reaching its zenith during the medieval period, when Lithuania ruled over most of what we now call Eastern Europe, there is evidence of habitation dating back to the late Paleolithic period, around 12,000 years ago. That is correct. People were already building fancy forts here while the rest of us were still figuring out how to light our farts. Excavations at Kernave have unearthed a treasure trove of artifacts, including jewelry, tools, pottery, and the remains of wooden structures. Due to the peat which covered the land, the ruins of Kernave are well preserved. Layer upon layer of cultural deposits here reveal the medieval soap opera that was life back then. Playhouses and artisan workshops tell stories of trade, craftsmanship, and probably a lot of medieval gossip. Did you hear that Lucas down the street traded his wooden plough for 5 pigs? Yeah. Scandalous. And he has two penises. At least that's what Emilia says. Today, Kernave is an archaeological and historical museum reserve. The museum showcases artifacts and detailed exhibits that let you step back in time without the need for a flux capacitor. Interactive displays and reconstructions of the ancient town offer a vibrant glimpse into how people lived, worked, and laughed way back when. And just in case you were wondering, they lived less, they worked more, and they laughed maniacally, as was tradition for the time. Kernave is also the site of an annual festival called the Days of Live Archaeology Festival. This is a must-visit for anyone with a kernel of interest in medieval history. This live reenactment action festival is where people go to adorn their medieval dress, drink mead, wave their swords around like they just don't care, and live for a day as if the 21st century had never happened, which many of us wish it never had. You can try your hand at medieval crafts, games and activities, and the first one to bring out a smartphone gets their head kicked in and their bollocks lopped off and thrown to the river gods. And then, centuries after all that burning, death and destruction malarkey, I came along, as I always do eventually, and I made this custom map for the game Cities Skylines 2. Why? Because I wanted to, that's why. And because I love history and I have an unnatural obsession with lost cities like this one, as always, this map was made to reimagine history. If Kernave had never been destroyed, how might it look today? If you also need to know, then you can grab the free map from the Paradox Mods site. Before that, though, I'd like to quickly ask you to like and subscribe if you haven't done already. My wife asks me to remind you this. She says that if you don't, then she will unleash such vengeance upon me. She'll make the destruction of Kernave look like a Teletubbies wedding. So, yeah, do that, please. Now, onto that map information. Here it is. Climate -4 to 23 degrees Celsius. Buildable area 87%. Outside connections, roads, rail, shipping, air, power, natural resources. Wheat 133 square kilometers. Forest 77.3 kilotons. Ore 111 kilotons. Oil 33.4 kilotons. Terrain, not quite as flat as it looks, many small rises. Right then, that's it for today's wee map and history lesson. I hope you learned something. You can now sleep easy in the knowledge that you are no longer being judged by flat-topped mounds at a lost Lithuanian city. Which is nice, isn't it? As always, thanks for coming, and don't forget that there is a Patreon if you like to support the things I do. No worries, if you don't, my minions will be swift in your defeat. Thanks again, and come back soon. Peace, love, and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Goodbye!